What is the wildest thing you've done in college? My friend and I didn't have a ride back home after a night out downtown, and bars were closed. So we decided to hitchhike the 5 miles back to our dorm. First van picked us up with 2 scantily clad women who were acting strangely. They kept getting more and more nervous, and they had to stop for gas after some phone calls. So we bolted out of there right when the van's sliding door opened. We were never sure what that was all about. The second guy picked us up on his early morning paper route. He passed around a joint he brought, and we all just kinda sat silently while he threw papers. He ended up taking us further away from home than we started. We got out of the car, eventually, when the sun was up, and realized most of our friends were getting up for the day, so they came and got us. If anything, it was just a random, very memorable night. I went to college in Detroit. This was in the 90s, before 9/11, and you didn't need a passport. Most of Detroit is a 15-minute drive to Windsor, Canada, where the legal drinking age is 19 instead of 21. Most of the time, 7 people would want to go to Windsor, but my Dodge Stratus only had room for 5, so the smallest people, usually girls, would go in the trunk for the 15-minute ride. I can't imagine what would happen today if I drove across the border with 2 girls hidden in my trunk. Pfft, amateur over here. Back in high school, I fit 7 guys into my Honda Civic Coupe, and still had trunk space. I was kinda kidnapped my freshman year of college because I missed a lot of red flags. I went on a date with a guy from my dorm hall the first weekend of college, and my first time out of my mom's house, 3,000 miles away. I didn't know anybody, so I figured why not. He offered to take me to a movie, and so we were driving, and I notice I now have no signal on my phone. And I don't know the area, but this guy is from here, so I just assume the movie theater must be super far from campus. I ask him how close we are, and he tells me we need to pick up his friend first. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. We finally pull up to the parking lot of what looks to be a warehouse. I trepidatiously follow this guy inside, being the stupid moron I was, and his friend greets us at the door. His friend was a pastor. Now, earlier in the week, I had told this guy I was an atheist. So he sat me down in a chair while his friend talked to me. The pastor starts proselytizing to me for 3 hours, saying things like if I don't get baptized right then and there that I would burn in hell for eternity. Until finally I begged to go home, and the guy I was on the date with agreed to take me back to the dorms. The next day he texted me, "Sorry if that was a little weird yesterday, lol." This was the same year that Take Me to Church by Hozier was popular, which my sorority sisters would later play in my honor at parties after I told them my story. College. I remember working security one night, which was one of my several part-time jobs, and getting a call about someone trying to break into a girl's room. The guy was gone when I got there, and no one was in the room, but there was a decent blood trail to follow because he'd punched the wire-reinforced safety glass in the half-hall door so that he could reach through and open it. I tracked him back to his room and waited for the cops and paramedics, who said that his hand resembled ground beef. Follow-up report said that he'd been doing acid and thought demons were out to get his girlfriend and that he had to save her. Don't do drugs, kids. That is terrifying. I was 17, visiting my older brother who was in college. We walked across the city to get to a house party, and when we arrived, we learned that the party hadn't started yet. The house owner then smoked 2 fat blunts with us. I got so stoned that I was already super tired. I passed out on the recliner chair. Woke up a while later to 3 college girls standing over me, calling me cute and basically just coddling me. I fell back asleep while they talked about me, and to this day, I wonder what would have happened if I had stayed awake. After I graduated from high school, I never went to college, so this is my college story. I got way too drunk at a frat party. Last thing I remember from that night was trying to find my way back to my dorm, falling in a thorn bush, and just laying there at 3 a.m., not moving. I came to around 6 a.m. in the hospital. Nothing bad, they just found me and were rehydrating me. Long story short, I ended up sneaking out of the hospital without my shoes, phone, or wallet, and walking through an ice storm, trying to find my way back. Tried hitchhiking, 2 truckers stopped and called the cops for me when I asked. Because at that point I had realized that I needed help, and the cops were my only resort because I didn't know any of my friends' numbers. The cops brought me back to my dorm, and a week later I got a summons to the dean. Turns out, that night, I was hammering on the door of the hockey coach's house, basically trying to break in because I was literally freezing. He said he was about to shoot me if I didn't stop, and luckily drunk me did. Then the cops and ambulance picked me up from the thorn bush I had passed out in. I was woken up at 3:30 a.m. by 2 girls I knew in my dorm. They were both barely holding onto the door frame and piss drunk. They asked me to take them to Taco Bell. I said no, because it was 3:30 a.m. on a school night, and I told them they needed to go to bed. They then knocked on the door and said if I didn't, they would drive themselves. I didn't want them driving, so I took them to keep them safe. Off we went, hunting for food in my Kia Soul. Our town has 3 Taco Bells. I went to the first one, and they were closed. We drove to the next one, and they were closed. We then drove to our last Taco Bell, and the manager met us at the drive-thru window and said, "We are out of beans, beef, pork, and chicken." Then proceeded to give us free Baja Blasts, cinnamon twists, and cheese quesadillas for our suffering. I then took the 2 girls home to our dorm, helped them into the elevator, took them to their rooms, and made sure they got into bed. It was a crazy night. Well, I mean, hey, you helped 2 idiots survive the night, and you got a free drink and some food out of it. A buddy of mine had gotten fucked up good and proper, and passed out in the common area of his dorm. The other guys put him on a cot, put him in the back of a pickup, and drove him to the front of the school, parked the cot in front of a big stone sign, and he woke up just after daybreak. 2 things. Took down the entire school network by messing up the settings on my 42 and minor, S2 at the time. Had them grab a new IP address every time they validated a hash. Instant DHCP pool death on boot. Students were banned from having personal routers because of me. I also set up a Yagi-Uda array on the roof to test out some telemetry boards we built, and accidentally blasted at 110 watts. Absolutely wrecked a bunch of random radio frequency stuff all over campus. What's worse, didn't have a call sign in my messages. How I never got arrested, I will never know. I attempted to set off fireworks in a clearing in the forested part of campus. Cops saw us walk out there and followed us. They flashed the lights, we scatter like rats. My buddy was visiting home that weekend and underage. He trips and falls into a bush. The cops find him, and while we all make it back to the dorm, he comes back with the cops about 20 minutes later. We were in it deep, until the cops got another call from dispatch, stating that some guy was getting assaulted outside of the on-campus Dunkin' Donuts. We got off scot-free and went right back to drinking. Went to my buddy's party on campus and got completely schmuckered. At some point, I broke into the non-rented or non-occupied apartment directly across from his, and fell asleep in the living room on the floor, because there was literally nothing in the apartment. I woke up panicking at like 10 a.m. with no idea where I was. I opened the front door and knocked on my buddy's room, and everyone was already awake. They were all freaking out a little and asked me, "Dude, what happened to you? Where were you?" It turns out that shortly after I disappeared, relatively early into the night, they all started looking for me and spent the better half of the night searching across campus, while I was passed out in the room right across from my buddy's apartment. Good times. Around Halloween, about 10 years or so ago now, me and my roommate went around some neighborhoods and sprayed silly string on a bunch of people's cars as a prank. Pretty crappy thing to do looking back, but us as dumb, barely adults sure had a blast. We bought 3 cans each, and at around 1 in the morning, we wandered around town tagging a good 15 or so cars with silly string. We also tipped a trash can on top of this old dude's car that we had the displeasure of knowing. That I'm not ashamed of. That old dink had it coming, and we never got caught. I was pretty notorious for my drunken antics. I'd been pretending to be a Spanish bullfighter on a road outside of the house I lived in, flourishing a towel at cars that approached me. I was put to bed by friends who realized that I was probably a bit too drunk to go to the bar with them. According to them, they went outside and had a smoke for about 5 minutes before heading to the bar. When they got to the bar, I was ahead of them in line to get in. Woke up the next day with homemade chocolate chip cookies scattered throughout my bedsheets. I was following until that last part. Now I'm just lost. Engineering school, senior level class. Our professor prepared us thoroughly for a test, essentially showing us how to solve a problem with detailed annotations, and he mentioned that it was going to be on next week's test. I didn't like how long the problem took to solve. It was 4 pages, so I reviewed some Euler identities and found a way to solve the problem in half a page. I was finished the test in 8 minutes, so I went home and played Minecraft. The professor was surprised, or maybe dubious that I finished so quickly, so he asked me to perform the problem in front of the class using different numbers the next time we met for class. Everything checked out. Thanks, Euler. I love how school seems to like teaching us the most complex way to solve a problem, so that we can show as much work as possible, when there's more often than not a way easier, way quicker way to solve it. The number of times I showed my parents a question in grade school, and they just went, "Why are you doing it like that? That takes way too long," was ridiculous. And this, in engineering school, is teaching people a 4-page math equation for a problem? When some dude who died in 1783 already had a simpler way to solve it? Why on earth would we be still teaching people the 4-page method when we have one that's a half page that was developed hundreds of years ago? I don't know. It just seems like they want us to put more numbers down on paper rather than getting to the answer faster. Especially since calculators came into play. It's like they want to actively disincentivize people from being able to use their brains for math. My friends and I ordered an Uber, thinking it would take about 20 to 30 minutes to arrive, when in reality the Uber driver was actually only 5 minutes away. We had 5 minutes to pregame with a supposedly one-shot sauce cup we found. We did 5 shots in a row, and then realized the sauce cup was actually 2 shots worth each, meaning we'd done 10 shots total for all of us within 5 minutes. It was a wild night. We got so hammered that we pissed on the president's statue at our university. We also got kicked out by the Uber driver because one of my friends threw up in the car. We tried to offer an extra $60 to the second driver to pick us up, but that driver was understandably suspicious because it was in the middle of nowhere. This is after a few attempts at booking Uber and a bunch of drivers canceling on us. This happened 11 years ago, but is still a good party story when the boys get together. Where do I begin? I have some great stories from college that had no eventual bearing on my career. My favorite is a social engineering hack back in 1997. We had a resident advisor who was kind of a jerk to me. I don't really recall our beef with each other, but it was real. We'll call him Scott. The entire dorm was about 200 people. It was a small dorm, so most people knew each other. We decided to have a little fun with Nerf guns. We did a game where you would randomly draw the name of someone to vanquish. When you hit your mark, you get a new name, and then that person is out of the game. No shooting in the dorm, or within 200 yards. So basically, you had to find them somewhere on campus. Mind you, I went to one of the largest universities in the US, so that could be a little tricky. When it was my turn to pull a name, I got Scott. And let me tell you, finding this dude was a challenge. It took me a week, but I had a bit of a genius idea. Probably the last one not killed by alcohol that night. I decided the best way to get Scott was if I knew his school schedule. At the time, the school registration was done online through a system. Your password was your social security number and your last name. Of course, I didn't have the information for Scott, so I created a fake petition requiring this information and passed it around the dorm. He took the bait, as did most people, and presto, I had everybody's class schedule. I was easily able to win the game with my genius idea. But people did not appreciate my methods. I won nothing but a cool story to tell people 25 years later. Held a joust in our dorm hallway, using shopping carts and wiffle ball bats as lances. I rode in the cart wearing a British flag as a cape, and a 12-pack soda box on my head as a helmet, along with a pair of safety goggles. This was back when the 12-pack boxes were shaped differently than they are now. In the interest of safety, we duct taped a couple recycling bins to the front of the carts to act as crude bumpers. We were all completely sober at the time. It just seemed like a good idea, and we ran with it. We had a Jello wrestling match that went horribly wrong. It was a brand new finished apartment with 3 small units that were all rented by my friends. we stupidly decided to host a Jello wrestling match. Only issue was the sheer amount of Jello that was needed. Our dumb college brains decided to try and make it in giant tubs outside since the temperature was in the 30s. Well, it didn't set up and was more like Jello syrup. The day of the event, it was freezing cold, single digits. We constructed the wrestling ring out of PVC pipes, a couple mattresses, and a big thick sheet of plastic. We poured the Jello syrup in, and it looked good. One of us drunk fools thought it would be a great idea to pour a couple gallons of cooking oil in to make it extra slippery. Another dumb idea. We had 10 matches lined up, winner taking home glory and a bottle of Grey Goose. The very first match, someone slips, lands on the PVC pipe, Jello syrup and oil pour out, and there's 100+ people crammed in the apartment. By the end of the night, the entire place was covered, walls, floor, ceiling, with red Jello syrup. Okay, now we jump into the rapid fire segment for stories too short to make a full entry out of, but too good to be left out. Let's hop in. A campus grounds worker mowed around my passed out body. Met a girl at a frat party. Smoked weed. She went down south on me at a park bench in the middle of the night, and people were walking by cheering us on. Graduated with a 3.9, then went back to food service. I peed in a dorm room when drunk. My son's roommate was furious. Threesome with an Olympic fencer while I was dressed as a cowgirl and my friend as a cheerleader. Drank 15 shots of tequila back to back, and lived. I got with my roommate's sister and mom in the same week. Broke into a zoo. Wow, you could make a reality TV series about the family in that second last story. That is some serious dysfunction. I wonder if the dad in that family is the one who peed in his son's dorm room. That would sure be the icing on the cake. Well guys, that's it for today. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave your story in the comments below. I would love to do a video on them in the future. With that said, I'm ReddList. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.